Okay, so we're traveling back up the port side here now, and you'll see coming into view is the port entry door. There's one of these on each side, so this is what you would refer to as the passenger side. Simply grab this guy and then open it right up. When you're using the doors, you'll notice they slide pretty easily, and they're going to have this little safety latch. If the boat is ever in motion, or even when it isn't, it's never a bad idea to make sure that is down. In fact, I highly recommend it if you're underway. This stops the door from sliding forward and creating an unsafe situation. So they are there for a really good reason. I definitely recommend you use them. Notice on the port side here, this will have a key. The starboard side will be no different. So you can lock it from the outside. You can also lock it with a slider on the inside. If we have a look to the door all the way on the other side there, you'll see there's a slider that goes up and down. Now the real fun begins. Let's go inside the cabin and hit up the main event. There's lots of really great stuff to talk about in here. We have electronics, we have seating, we have bedding. It's all happening in here. So come on inside and let's go check it out. Okay, so here we are inside the cabin, and this is the aft cabin as we have mentioned before. So great seating area up here, right? So at your left-hand side, you have this USB charger. You have this handle for when things get gnarly, which is really great. Little cup holder. Another grab bar up top. Starboard side's the same. No USB charging on this side, but it does have the same grab rails. Okay, cup holder as well. We also have a smoke detector on this side. This one is actually removable. It should last 5 to 10 years as is. So one more little goodie back here is we have this seat that actually is on a hinge and opens up. And hidden in here is our receptacle. So when we are on shore power, or if you have an aftermarket inverter installed, then this is where that power is going to be, okay? So hidden in there, and then we have some first mate fobs, and that is for the wireless engine shutdown. Okay, so that's that. Let's flip this up and let's go take a look at the aft cabin. Bit of a redesign here on the 29 versus the 28. Instead of everything lifting up here high, what they do is they lift sideways. So first things first, let's get this back rest cushion up and out of the way. There's some storage back here. So while holding that one, you lift up this one. This one's now holding this one. And then you simply take this guy, a bit of a squeeze and a pull, and you move it down to here. Okay. And then that holds that up and out of the way. All right, so as I said, this is the aft cabin model. I know I've mentioned it a lot, but I think it's a really, really great 29 feature. Sitting back here, we have this huge space to lie down. This is just so comfortable back here. There's so much room. I'm looking around and I can see above me, we have this hatch, but I can also access the handle from the inside and I can open it up. So the fresh air that I felt immediately just opening it this far was incredible. So over here to my right, which is the starboard side, we have a carbon monoxide tester. So there's a test and mute button on it. This particular one, unlike the smoke detector, the carbon monoxide detector is actually hardwired to the batteries. If this thing is beeping, it could mean either it's got an actual carbon monoxide alarm to tell you about. There's also a couple of little things that I want to tell you about too. One could mean that there could be low batteries on the boat. Sometimes your batteries go down and they get flat. This thing has a tendency to go off, indicating there's a low battery scenario. So this thing, don't be surprised if it does go off if your batteries go down. Also, it does have an end of life as well, but it should be many, many years, 5-10 years at least, before this thing goes off. We have these little side vents here as well. So we can slide those open and it's just a little bit of fresh air, but it's just enough to make a difference. There's one on this side, one on that side. Also in front of me, you'll notice there's 2 Webasto vents down here. One on the port side, one on the starboard. So these guys here, this is where the warm air comes from the diesel heater. This is where that will come through. Above me here, I have some lighting, and then onto my left, I have the light switch for that. So that's nice and easy. And then underneath me, I'm gonna pull up these cushions and I'm gonna show you guys what's under here. Pretty incredible actually to have this nice big basin in here to stow stuff in. And most of the time you wouldn't even know it was there, but it's a great place to put stuff. Everyone knows that's ever had a boat, where to put things is always a big deal, right? So this is a really great feature. And then after this, we're gonna move into this space here and show you some technical stuff. All right, look at all this cool stuff. If you're a tech junkie like me, you're gonna love it down here. So earlier, the very beginning of this handover experience, we showed you how to turn the batteries on and off with those sliding rocker switches. They are remote switches to control these particular dials right here. And these are excellently labeled. We have starboard start, we have the port start battery, and then we have the service battery in the middle. You'll notice earlier there was 4 switches, but there's only 3 rotary knobs here. The bow one is up forward, and we'll show you that later when we get there. But when I switch that switch up there, these things will turn automatically. However, if there is some sort of failure with that feature, with that remote feature, you can actually push in and go one further and you can lock it off. You can even remove it entirely. So that's essentially locked out, right? So not just locked off, but locked out because there's no way to turn it on anymore. But the best way to have it for sure is in a mode called auto on. And then that switch will be able to turn it on and off up at the bow there. Or should I say up at the helm. There is actually a mode, one more mode called manual on. So if I want to remove the ability for the remote rocker switch to be able to control this thing, if I put it into manual on, it will actually lock it in and nothing will disconnect this apart from me coming back down here and putting it either back into auto or back into manual off. All 3 switches work the same, and the one at the bow is actually no different. Moving around, let's just have a quick look here and look at the other stuff we have. We have a 3-stage charger. I'm really happy to see this charger in here. It can do 3 banks at once, which is great. The previous models would actually take turns. It would do bank 1, bank 2, bank 3, kind of sequentially, but they've moved to this master volt charger that can actually do all 3 banks all at once. Awesome. What we also have are the batteries themselves. So 2 of them are going to be your service battery, and then 1 will be port start and 1 will be starboard start, okay? Right in the middle here, we have this power steering pump. So when you are driving your engines, the reason it's so easy and smooth is because this pump is energizing, or should I say pressurizing all the fluid for you. So it makes the engine steering nice and smooth. It'll make a bit of noise, like you'll hear it, but it's not too loud, and it's back here should you ever have an issue and you ever need to come looking for it. You'll notice you have these 2 devices on the side, and if you're wondering what they are, they're basically to take the engine output, engine alternator output, so the charging that's produced when you run your engines, it takes it and then it splits it up amongst the banks. And there's 1 for each engine and it splits it to the various locations. I won't get into the weeds, but that's basically what they're for. I actually do want to point out that on the other side of this little wall here, there's a whole bunch of main fuses for all the main circuits. These aren't things that are really designed to blow, but they're there for safety. We've actually done a much deeper dive on the DC system in a standalone video. So we'll put a link to that down below, and you can go there and find an even deeper dive on the DC stuff. But for now, I think this is a really great overview. You know what's in here, you know where to find it, and that's what this video is all about. So I'm going to close this up and we're going to move on through and have a look at some of the electronics. Okay guys, we're almost at the helm, but just before we get there, let's stop and dwell on these seats for just a moment. We have some storage in the back, which is really great, but they do lift up and they are holding some goodies underneath them, so let's check those out. In here, we open these bolt latches, and there's also latches on the side. There's 1 for each chair, so this one will allow this one to come up, and then there's 1 there as well. And once those are taken off, we can come in to our refrigerator. So this one here runs off DC power. It does need your service bank to be on to operate. And on the inside here, we have a thermostat. So this is actually on and has been on for a little while. I can feel it. But if you want to turn it on and off, it does have this dial here as well. Okay. So it doesn't always have to be on. This is how you would turn it off. Do not forget to lock it back into place once it's down. You do not want this seat moving around. You definitely want it locked. So 1 here, 1 here. But we also have these controls, so to pull, and you can slide forwards, you can slide backwards with that one, and then this one here is a bit of a swivel, right? So you can turn it from side to side. And then this here is a bolster, so if you're standing at the helm and you want to just stand up and have this out of the way, it's good for that. On this chair here, this one's undone, let's lift it up and have a look inside. So here we actually have a sink. So this one here requires the water pump to be on, which it currently isn't, but when it is, it will give you your fresh water right here in this sink, and that'll drain overboard. So So nice little feature there for sure. Again, don't forget to lock it up when you're done. Make it nice and secure. The helm. Here's the dash. First things first, let's get some lighting going. So as we mentioned all the way at the beginning, there is those switches to turn on. So as long as your service bank is on, you should be able to come right up here and turn any of these on. Over here on the right, which is a little bit hard to see from your vantage point, there's actually a little capacitive touch button, and it doesn't press in so much, but it's just a press like this. So pressing it once, you should bring all the backlighting on. If I press and hold it, it should dim down, you see that? And then dim back up again. So good for night driving if you want some backlighting but don't want it too bright. It'll have different sequences with different buttons on different, the lighting around each halo switch. So for example, if my backlighting is off and I turn my nav light on, it doesn't necessarily mean the nav light isn't on, but if I do this, you'll see that the backlighting comes on. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to backlighting. Okay, same deal with the anchor light. So nav light here, that one there turns the anchor light on automatically because that is required for steaming. However, if I'm just at anchor, I can just do this one by itself, and that'll be just the all-round white light that we looked at earlier on the mast. Okay, so moving on to the next one, we have our deck lights. So they're going to be the ones outside the boat. Okay, so that one's pretty straightforward. Underwater lights, if equipped, you can press that one and it'll turn them on. If it's a white and blue, then usually a quick succession, like an on-off quick succession, will actually change color. And then we have our helm light that's going to turn this one on up above me. A couple more light switches I want to show you so we can get some light into this cabin space. So they've actually put a couple over here on the port side. So we can just hit that one. That's more of an ambient mode. So you'll notice some really cool backlighting comes in from the side here. And then also above that panel there, you see there's some strip lighting. Okay. And then there's another switch here on the wall. When I hit this one here is the rest of it. So now that we have all those on, let's move through the rest of the dash. We are fully illuminated, so let's keep moving. We have the bilge pump forward and bilge pump aft. Now these are on automatic float switches, so they will come on automatically if there's water in there. However, if you want to turn it on manually, you can hit that button and you'll see if we have our backlighting on, that light will come on. But this is actually one of the exceptions where it will come on anyway, right? As I said, there's a couple of different scenarios, but this is one that will come on. Let's just say I don't have these buttons depressed. However, the float switch does engage in one of these spaces and I just see the blue halo ring come on, but I haven't touched the button. That means the pump is running, so the float switch is activated. So there could be water in there, and you should probably go check it out. However, sometimes a float switch can be sticky, but it will mean your pump is running. It'll mean that. So definitely in either scenario, you got to go check out those bilge spaces if these are coming on by themselves. There's two auxiliary switches here, which aren't actually hooked up, but they are there for future upgrades and installs. If you want to have some control over something, right here at the dash, some sort of optional upgrade you have done aftermarket, then these are great to have right here. There is one little button down here, and you'll see this particular 29 has this button under here. So if you peel back and look at the displays, you'll notice that this is actually the main switch to turn the displays on and off. Not every single 29 is going to have one of those. I've noticed some with and some without them, but they are good for if you want to leave your service bank on, so your service batteries on for whatever reason, like a fridge that's under this chair, and if you want to have the displays off so they don't come on during the middle of the night and stuff like that. So it's kind of quite nice to have that little feature there. Down back over to this side, we have our wipers, right? So we press it once to turn it on, and that'll set them going. So immediately they'll just jump into what's called the intermittent mode, and then you hit it one more time and that'll hit to basically kind of low speed, and then there's a high speed after that. And then if you press and hold, it'll actually do the window washing. Okay, press wiper on to turn it off, right? So after it's depressed, it is off. Okay, we have down here our bow thruster. So the heavy bow aux battery switch that we looked at down on the port side. This guy right here, this one, that does need to be on for this to work. So it is already on, so it's two fingers on and on together. Click, you see that little light, then we know we are operational. Thrust one way, thrust the other way, simple as that, nice and easy. Okay, and then you can turn it off. Or if you wait and don't give it any inputs, this will actually turn off by itself after 10 minutes or something like that. This little guy right here, this has been on most of the Axopars to date. This is simply to control your trim tabs. So if you ever want to just come back to home position, you just hit down. So that's the tab. Down is tabs up, right? and that'll bring them all the way back up. And then if you're underway and you want to roll to port, or you want to roll to starboard, what that's going to do is going to move your trim tabs in the appropriate direction to make that happen. And if, let's just say you're centered, I can actually hear them moving in the background. You may or may not be able to hear that through the microphone. But if I just go straight up, then that's both tabs down at the same time. So when the tabs go down, the water hits it, creates lift, and it'll actually bring the bow down as well. All right, so pretty standard steering wheel here. Very nice, very comfortable. Nice leather on there. Down here are our main key switches for your engines. So we have a few positions. So we have the off position, like this, and then accessories, right? Just like your car. And then the on position will actually power up all the electrical side of things, like the like all the computers that are connected to the engines and stuff like that. All that stuff will wake up. And then you do one little turn like this. Engines are in the water. Got to make sure there is trim here. But we'll talk about that in a sec. So it's a 1 for that side, 1 on that side. Okay, now they're both fired up and running. And then I also have a button on the controller as well, the throttle shift controls. You'll see this guy right here. I can press that guy and it turns them both off. And then I can also use it to turn them on as well if I don't want to use the key switches. So yeah. In this particular case, your key switches are located literally 1 inch away from this button. But the reason that's there is so, you know, some other boat builders might want to put their key switches in a totally different area of the boat, but it gives the OEM the option to just have the helm control able to turn the engines on and off here, so you don't have to, you know, go around and start and come back again. So nice feature there. So on the top of this control head for your engines, we have 1 for port and 1 for starboard if you have twin engines right here. So that's just the port engine up and down for trim. This is just the starboard engine up and down for trim. And then if you use this one here on the side, it's always on the port lever. So this will do both up or do both down. A couple of extra little features on this controller as well is down here you'll see some buttons going on. So at the top here you have a brightness level, up down for brightness. So this will actually do the backlighting just for this control head, right? You can go up and down, which is quite nice when you're running at night. One lever mode simply means that this one lever will control both engines. And turn that off. And then there is transfer, but that's not relevant in this particular case because we only have 1 control unit. That would be relevant on boats that have multiple control heads. And then we have this throttle only mode. This is more of like an engine warm-up. You'll see that these neutral lights start to flash. What that means is you can go safely into forward detent and then beyond, and your engines will rev, but it's actually not in gear, so your propeller doesn't spin. So you can rev the engine essentially in neutral, okay? And then you hit it 1 more time and then they will go solid again, meaning that if you were to go into gear like this, oof, you'll jump into gear, okay? That's kind of what that means. And then down here is our active trim. So you hit it once and then you'll see these lights come on. I believe we may need to commission this so these stay solid, but basically you can go up and down through the trim levels. Right, so active trim is basically like an automatic trimming. It'll trim your engines based on the speed that you were traveling at, not actually the RPM. So the faster you go, the more engine trim it's going to give you. And then based on which trim level you like to operate under, 1 through 5, the higher you get in number, the more aggressive the trimming will become. What I mean by more aggressive is it'll start to trim up more earlier. Right? So at lower speeds, you'll get more trim from the engines if you're on a higher profile. So that's a little bit about how active trim works. But the active trim can also be accessed through these displays over here. So pretty standard kit is this stop lanyard down here. Mercury's been using this for years. Same deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to yank it out and you'll see that the engine's just stopped. And then an alarm will go to say, hey, emergency stop. But putting it back up again kind of resets it. Your engines they will not start if it's ever down. So if your engines ever don't start, come and check this guy because you may have knocked it, right? So that is the normal position. And to put this thing back in, you kind of go in, put it there and lift it back up again, okay? All right. And then this thing here will obviously attach to like a a belt loop or something like that. The driver is the person who's supposed to have this on, because the idea is if the driver falls out, then the engines will shut down. You know what we should talk about next is this sunroof. So I'm going to open it up, but you'll notice there's going to be some canvas there because we haven't actually taken the canvas off. So you press and you hold it to bring it back. Oh, sorry, you press once and release to bring it back, and it should go automatically all the way to the back position. And if this canvas wasn't on, we would have fresh air and sunshine through here. Really quite a nice feature. And then much like opening, closing will be the same. It will be a single press. What it will probably do is stop around here somewhere. I think it's a safety feature in case there's an arm or a head or a leg or a limb or something like that outside. And then you just got to close the last little bit manually. Yes, it still does that. Okay, so press and a hold for the last little bit and it will stop and shut itself down. And then over this side, let's talk about the radio for a second. So we do have a sound system here. It does have a hard mounted control, but I think you're going to have the best experience if you're using it through the MFD. Both screens will have this audio button on the side. You can pull it out. If this is what you're presented with, it means it's currently in the off mode. So you hit that and it should turn on. It has different sources and modes. So you'll see right now it's popped up right onto FM radio. So there is a Bluetooth mode here. So you can hit Bluetooth, okay? There's settings up here as well. This should all be pretty much set and shouldn't be much to do in there. However, we can go volume up and down through here. Okay, so over here to our left, we have a Simrad VHF radio. It's as simple as just pressing this button here to turn it on. Oops, maybe a press and a hold. Okay, there it goes. So this one's the RS40. Okay, so you can get straight to 16 or 9 simply by using this button here. We won't do too much of a deep dive on this radio today, but it's pretty straightforward for its operation. So we have a handset here. Here's our button, which is the PTT or push to talk. So you press, you hold, wait one moment, and then start speaking. Okay, so this little dial over here is how we get to our how we go through our stations. Okay, so 16 international distress channel. Along the top here, you'll see that we're on the Canadian frequency band. So this boat is being sold in Canada, so that's where we need to be. If you're in a country, another country, the two other options on this particular radio is USA, and the other one is international. So there's an international band as well for this radio. And to change it, it's buried in the settings, but I don't think for the purpose of this video, we'll go too much deeper. It's also showing us that it's connected to GPS, so it is actually feeding GPS in. So if we were to set up our MMSI for DSC, which is digital select calling, then these GPS coordinates would be transmitted digitally through our VHF. AIS is automatic identification system there, and that's for our ships, right? So what that means is the VHF radio is actually receiving AIS locations from other vessels, and they will actually be plotted on our chart here. So if you can see on our chart that we have all these boats over here, the reason that these are there is because this VHF is capable of AIS and it's equipped with it, and then it's taking that data from where those ships are, and it's putting it right onto our chart over here. So we can also go up and down with the channels on the remote here, and we can also go with the volume up and down, and you'll see when I change it here with the volume, it also changes here, which is quite nice. But this dial also controls the squelch, which is this one over here. Watch it move. There it goes. The squelch is basically how much you are resisting static. So the more you go up, the more you're cutting out. Up here, you're almost going to hear no transmissions at all. When setting squelch, you should go down to the lowest acceptable level. If I keep going, I'm going to get lots of static. Okay, so you want to find that level where you're filled with static and go 1 or 2 notches above it, and just see how things go from there. This radio is also equipped with some weather modes, and you can scan between them. And if you have the DSC mode, the DSC enabled with MMSI, this distress button will actually transmit all of the information about you and your location directly to the organizations that actually are monitoring distress signals. Making a call on 16, just know that that is the distress channel, so it isn't something, it's not a channel you're supposed to be talking on much. There's other channels for that. And last but probably the most important thing about this radio here is how to hail a marina. Most people use their VHFs for when they're traversing between different marinas and they're looking for a slip assignment or something of that nature. So let's just say I wanted to go to one of the islands around here, and I've set my journey up, and they want me to call in when I get there. Generally it's 66 alpha. So to get to the alpha channels, it's actually a little bit different to some other radios with the Simrad. You've got to keep going up through the channels. So you'll notice I get to 66, but that is just 66. It's not 66 alpha. To get to alpha, we've got to keep rolling up through all the big main numbers or the integers. And then we get into this group that have a 10 in front of it. That basically means 5 alpha. That's what that means. So if I go all the way to 66 alpha, so if they send you an email and say call us on 66 alpha when you get there, this is the station you need to call them on. Coast Guard, for example, is 83 alpha in this area, so that's what that would look like, 1083 or 1066. Okay, and I think that's a pretty good quick overview of the VHF. Now I think I'm going to move quickly up to here and show you the Webasto. So this little controller over here, you hit this button and then it will fire up. When it turns green, it means I'm going to start in the heat mode, and it's going to ask you immediately what kind of cabin temperature you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want it pretty warm in here. I want it 25, and then I'm going to come up to here, and this is the speed of the fan. So that's the fastest, middle, lowest. Okay, that's pretty much all you need to do to turn it on. There's much more menu features inside of it, but I think that's a much bigger video, and we've actually already made a video on this, and this controller has been the same for a few years, so that video should still be very much relevant. So please go check it out. We'll put a link down below for that too. This little sensor to the right of it, this is actually the cabin temperature sensor. So if I'm telling the unit to turn on and run and maintain a cabin temperature of 24 degrees, this is how it knows how warm it is in here. Okay, so it's getting pretty toasty warm in here. These heaters are working great. You notice we can spin these dials here. So this is where the hot air comes out, and you have these little flaps here. So you want to face that towards this window here. It does a really great job of defogging, good for rainy or wet days. So that's pretty good. However, we are getting a little warm. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it off, and it really just as simple as coming over here and pressing that button. White means standby or off, and the green means it's actively heating. So right now we'll just press that button that one time, and that shut that system down. It will go through a cool down sequence or a cool down procedure. So you may hear the system running and the fans going a little bit, but know that it's just trying to expel as much heat out of the little unit that's buried in the boat outside. So it will go through a sequence, but just let it do its thing. As long as that's white, it's being shut down. So moving right along, we have the screens, kind of the heart, right? When you're underway, you're spending a lot of time moving between the screens and the outside environment. Talking of the outside environment, look around. I can see 360 degrees around me. It's an awesome spot to drive a boat from. Like, this is amazing. So onto the screens, the sidebar here. A big one's going to be your engines, right? So you can pull this out and you can have some basic engine controls over here. There's an audio control here as well to control your stereo stuff. And then we also have this autopilot here as well, right? If it is enabled and installed. On this particular Simrad display, this one's actually referred to as an NSX. So all the 29 Axopars will actually have the NSX displays, which are the newer Simrad screens, and they look and feel a little bit different to the previous generation Simrad stuff. If I hit this button down here, I'm going to move this sidebar out of the way. I'm going to get this page full of tiles. Okay, same over here, page full of tiles. These are basically all the apps that I can open. So the chart is obviously a pretty major one to use, but another one is going to be our Mercury page. So some people like to run with the Mercury page open. So if I have my engines on, let's just start them up. There's that cranking RPM showing you what's happening on each engine, which is kind of nice. And then we have our fuel gauge here in the middle. We have our trim here. So this is engine trim, not trim tabs, just so you know. So if I come up with these engines, you'll see those go up and down. And if you have active trim enabled, then this will actually, you'll see them move up and down by themselves the faster you go, to try to keep the boat trimmed, basically. So if there's any alerts or errors or faults that come up on the Mercury system, will generally pop up right here. Here's my battery voltage for port start engine. Here's my battery voltage for starboard start engine. You'll notice these up are at around 14 and a half. That indicates engines are running, alternators are outputting voltage and current to charge the battery system. If I shut them down, you'll see them almost immediately drop down to 13 ish. They've come back up again, but that's what's called a surface charge on them. However, these will drop back down and they'll probably sit steady at around 13 point something, 13.2 or something like that. There they go, they're already starting to drop. So unless they're actively being charged, they're never going to sit at 14.5 volts. That's a way of knowing if your alternators are working or not. If one of these is staying steady after you've started the engines, then you know you have an alternator problem. That's what this is kind of nice for. Back into this main screen here, we're going to have a look at our Echo. So Echo is basically, Echo is our transducer. So this is our fish finder. So great for fishing and things like that. There's a bunch of features that we probably won't go too deep into, again, just for the nature of this video. I like to keep it fairly easy to follow along with, but if you are a bit of a fisherman and really into it, know that you can come here and change your frequency. For example, if you want to go down a little deeper, you'll notice here exactly where this change has happened. So this is more of a higher definition. This is more of a lower definition. 50 Hertz will shoot deeper because it's a lower frequency, but you will lose some resolution if you do that. So it's up to you to kind of choose the right one based on what you're trying to achieve out of your transducer. There we are back again at a 200 kilohertz. You can do all sorts of stuff in here, like change the color palettes and stuff like that. Actually, what I want to show you, because this is quite important, is there is a pause mode, this little guy right here. So sometimes you might open this screen and this won't be up, and you'll be here and it just say paused. It may not even have any of this stuff and nothing's happening. What you want to do is you want to just open this side menu and you want to come in here and just hit play, and then it'll start transmitting. So that's a good little tidbit there for you. Down here, down the side, obviously we have all these little tiles. We can jump in here and change them to whatever it is we want to be, or want to see, should I say. So let's just say fuel economy on GPS. I don't necessarily want to see that, so I can jump in and kind of change what I want this one to be. So this is configurable from almost any page that has one of these. So you can jump in here and say, well, I want it to be a different type of gauge, and I can come in here and just choose something else. I'll save you all the time it takes to do that, but just let you know that that's absolutely possible. Back to our home button again, and then here we are on that main screen. We have the instruments panel. Honestly, with this Mercury tile, I don't really use this very often, but it may be something you want to come in and configure and set up. But most people really just default to using Mercury. Yeah, you got some stuff here, but honestly, these kind of headings and speed over ground dials and things like that, you get a lot more bang for buck out of your real estate on other screens than this gauges page, but hey, it's nice to have if you're into it. Another thing here is our recent or open apps are all going to be here on the side. So because I was just in my Echo page and the Mercury page, you see how they're there for like quick access. I don't have to actually back all the way out to the main menu, so that's kind of nice. There's an MOB button, so if you lose someone overboard, you do that and it puts a like a marker exactly on that GPS coordinate, so you'll see that appear on your chart. Waypoints and routes is more of like a menu system to access any saved waypoints and stuff that you may have in your system. Right now there's nothing actually saved on this boat, but when you do save them, this is where you find them. You can see them over here and then also listed as well. So let's go back to the main menu and let's hit up the chart. Let's get into this. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. This is really what it's all about with an MFD. So right now you can see we can pinch to zoom, right, which is quite nice. We can hit this button here, make it a little bit of a bigger screen or a little bit of a smaller screen, and still have our sidebar. When you're in the chart page, you're going to have this side menu as well, which is going to give you some chart settings. So one of my favorite settings to turn on is a mode called Look Ahead. So what that'll do is actually, when you're underway, instead of having your boat in the middle of the screen, it'll drop it down to this lower position so you can see more of what's ahead of you and less of what's behind you, which I find to be quite handy. I really quite like that. AIS, we mentioned that when we looked at the VHF. So this little AIS button here, if you turn that guy off, you see all the boats disappear. The ones that were plotted on the chart using the VHF AIS system. So you turn that on and then they come back again. So quite nice to see where other boats are. I like to leave it on. I think it's good to know what other boats are around. If I touch somewhere on the screen like that, you see it'll put this little crosshairs on it. And then from there I can kind of decide to interact with that spot, right? Here's my little menu thing that I can move around if it's in my way. But I can just hit this button here and I can really just hit the go-to button and it'll just do a straight line to that spot. However, let's do something a little bit more advanced. Let's just say we want to head out to, so I want to head to here. So I touch this spot, I hit here and then I hit auto route to cursor. And what it'll do is actually calculate this auto route, which is really quite handy. It saves you from making individual waypoints all up and down the screen. And you'll see that it's done its thing. But you've got to be a little careful with this auto routing thing. You want to keep a pretty good eye on it. Sometimes it'll do some stuff like put you, inside two little, islands here, and that's not great. So it will, you do want to make some edits to your navigation. So for example, there it is there. And I can just grab it and then I can move it and then let it have a little bit of a think. And then you see it's kind of fixed that, right? And that's actually pretty good there. So always make sure if you're auto routing that you're actually checking this stuff out. Press and hold, and then it'll make that one of the route points so I can move it up and around and put it in different places. Okay guys, I just want to show you really quickly how to make an auto route. So let's just say I want to make a little route around to here into English Bay. I simply put my target in the area that I want to go, and I can hit this little button here, and I can hit auto route to cursor. It'll think for a little bit, but it should set me out a course all the way around there. And you'll see there it goes. Okay, so make sure you have a good review. You may need to make some edits and just make sure that you're happy with it. Sometimes the system may or may not take you exactly where you want to go. So make sure that you do review every part of that course before you get going. So if I tap it, if I tap my course, you'll see that right now this is regarded as being active navigation. So when I pull up my menu, I can stop the navigation or I can edit the navigation. So I can edit the route here as well. So let's just stop that navigation and then we turn that mode off. Okay. If we are scrolling and panning around like this and we want to get back to where we were, we can simply just hit this button right here and then it centers us right where we need to be. Another little nice thing is that this little north symbol up here, right now this chart is set to north up. However, if I hit this one, it's going to change it to heading up. So I'm looking that way, and that's now where the map is orientated. So if I was to move around, then this whole chart would spin with me, kind of like car turn-by-turn navigation, right? Whereas this one just locks you with north in the up position and your boat just moves around.